Welcome to Cultural Fluency Makers. I'm your host, David Wellish. Each week, we welcome leaders to share how they stay ahead of the ever-changing consumer landscape. With today's cultural transformation, top brands need to understand diverse consumer segments from Gen Z, Hispanic, and LGBTQ+ to gamers, wine enthusiasts, and basketball fanatics in Iowa. Their marketing strategies require them to keep the pulse on their consumers, but also their brand in the category to continue to grow revenue for the long term. Cultural Fluency Makers is sponsored by Collage Group, the only cultural intelligence engine that provides brand and consumer insights on the why that drives consumer behavior and purchase decisions. Let's get started. So I am ready for what I know will be an intellectually intriguing and delightful discussion today. I am genuinely thrilled to dive into a conversation with someone who has spent over 2 decades masterfully bringing brands to life and making them impossible to ignore. He's an award-winning brand transformation expert recognized by Clio, Effie, and Brand Week for crafting compelling brand stories that deliver real business impact. He has scaled Victoria's Secret Pink into a $450 million cultural phenomenon. He has repositioned Pearle Vision from a retail chain to a trusted healthcare services leader, achieving 8 consecutive years of growth and a #1 ranking for quality of care. His impressive track record includes driving double-digit revenue growth and leading P&L for iconic names such as W Hotels, Warner Brothers, Ralph Lauren fragrances, etc. He's the author of the book Moving Your Brand Out of the Friend Zone. Doug Zarkin, welcome to the show.
How are you, my friend? God, I mean, maybe my dad, if he heard this, would understand what I do. But I appreciate it. Thanks for taking the time.
Oh, I'm excited about this. Let's dive in. Doug, so much happening in our world today. Given the cultural and demographic landscape shifts that we've seen in the country in the last, decade plus, what role do you think cultural insights, cultural intelligence plays in consumer-driven businesses today?
Wow. It is impossible to be successful on a short-term and even a long-term basis if you as a brand leader aren't staying very much in touch with what is happening culturally. We live in a cancel culture. We live in a culture where mistakes are eventually forgiven, but not forgotten. And so marketers and leaders who are challenged with sustaining success over time and building their brand trajectory in a positive way have to really keep their finger on what's happening in the ecosystem around us in order to better position their business, not just in the minds of their consumer target, but importantly in the hearts of their consumer target.
Doug, that's beautifully said, and we'll get into what culture actually means and what do we mean by it. But what's hard? What's hard? What are the key challenges here?
It is very difficult for brands to think about building a business one customer at a time. I like to call it thinking human. If you went about your day treating every customer who walked into your door or went to your website as if they were the only customer that did that, what would you do? How would you treat them? How would you handle a problem? What would your post-purchase relationship look like? That is the most difficult, in that in order to win big, you often have to think small. You got to approach it through a series of marginal gains in your relationship, not trying to win, with an overhead smash or, an ace, to use the tennis metaphor a little bit deeper. You're creating a dance, you're creating a relationship. You want to sustain success with that customer over time. You don't want to fire your customer, take the win, but eventually have the loss. You want that customer to be in and involved in your business for more than just the single transaction. A Harvard Business Review once said that it costs 5 to 25% more to get a new customer than it does to keep a customer. So think about that in terms of your model for where your revenue is coming from. It is more efficient, more effective, and dare I say more human to really emphasize your existing customer relationships versus putting all of your eggs in, I got to bring new people in and not really remember who got you there.
So you're talking about delighting, retaining versus acquiring new, which makes sense. But you also talked about the importance for brands to be, in culture. And so I guess my question is, what's hard about that?
It's hard because, let's take politics as an aspect of culture. 50% of the room is going to agree, 50% of the room is going to disagree. Where do you go? I like to say the middle solves the riddle, stay neutral. But there are certain issues that are absolutes that brands, if they decide they want to engage in a cultural conversation, should be on the right side of. The challenge is what are those? And then you have to have the intestinal fortitude to deal with the fallout of being meaningful in the conversation relative to a cultural issue. I think the other aspect is determining what role your brand should play in culture. Not every brand has the right or the platform to speak broadly about cultural issues. Some brands should honestly just keep their mouth shut. Other brands should really think about choosing where they want to double deep. And when I say keep your mouth shut, meaning like, I don't necessarily know if I want to hear from celebrity X on every single issue. It's more of where do you have the right, where have you earned the right to play? With the exception of if you're one of those mega brands that really is controlling the cultural conversation, you have to err on the side of a point of view. Brand, your consumer base is too big and they're expecting you to have a point of view on it.
It's interesting. We obviously, Doc, we've done a lot of research, given that I run Collage, which is the leading cultural intelligence company. And so to this notion of the middle, unless you know why or how, you stay in the middle. I would agree with you, except that Gen Zers are looking for brands to play a role, right? They're looking for brands to stand for stuff. And so I wonder, do you think that staying silent is a viable strategy with Gen Zs?
So first of all, that was the nicest, Doug. I completely disagree with you. You're an idiot I've ever heard. So I should, and we should be very careful that we're speaking in generalities. Certainly today's generation, Gen Z or even Gen Alpha, is expecting brands to have a much greater platform of opinions than ever before, whether that's beauty brands, fashion brands, CPG brands. I do think you raise a very interesting point, which is it possible to stay neutral? And does silence actually hurt you? And the answer I'm going to give you is one that you definitely aren't going to like, which is it depends. It's all relative. And why is it relative? Again, you have to look at where your brand fits in to the ecosystem of culture. Large QSR brands where visitation is 3 to 5 times a month that are really leading and have the ability to create words and phrases have a much bigger responsibility. But we as people have a responsibility. Put the brand aside for a second. We as people now have platforms to have a voice. Sometimes that voice is productive. More often than not, it's not. So when I say to you that I'm not sure that every brand has the right to have a voice on every opinion, it's more of you got to look at where do you sit in. Again, the humility to come from, does somebody really value the opinion you're going to have? Or are you trying to be bigger than you are by inserting yourself into a conversation where it doesn't belong?
Well said, and I completely agree with that point of view. So, as you know, because you actually participated in one, I've been the last 12 months plus moderating and facilitating roundtables where
Yep.
we're talking about sort of these topics, and it's been very interesting, and the participants are either CMOs or top marketing and insights professionals. And anytime we talk about cultural relevance, and the role that cultural relevance plays in winning hearts and minds of consumers, most people raise their hand and go, it is incredibly important. It is essential. I wanted to ask you, what is cultural relevance to you? Like what's the definition of cultural relevance? We at Collage call it cultural fluency.
Yeah.
We think that companies should be culturally fluent given the demographic landscape. But what is it? And how do you think a brand becomes one?
There's a lot of layers to that. Let me go back to your original sort of premise. People will universally stand up, to your point, affirm, yeah, we should be culturally relevant. I call that the puppy syndrome. Hey, wouldn't you love a puppy? Oh, I love puppies. Okay, here, wait a minute. Like, I don't know if I am equipped to actually take care of a puppy. The idea of being culturally fluent theoretically is wonderful. The obligation that comes with it, very, very hard. And it is fearful. It is fearful. I mean, we live right now in such a divisive culture where it's not about whether you agree or not. It used to just be, I disagree. And that was it. It was fine. Like, you get into a debate on politics, on religion, and it used to be fine. You disagree, cool. Now it's you disagree and I never want to see you again. And I think that's the biggest ramification that, frankly, has people like me afraid, brand leaders afraid. It's measure twice, cut once. If we weigh in, are we going to be willing to handle the emails, the text messages, the phone calls, even if the issue is so obvious that anybody who would respond negatively, you would classify as ignorant? Even that statement alone is myopic, because what may be obvious to you and me may not be obvious to somebody. And so again, I think because the stakes on the negative side are as intense as they are on the positive side, people are erring on the side of caution and saying, you know what, I'm just going to watch. I'm going to have my feelings, but I'm just going to watch. And I can't say that that is a bad strategy. I also can't fault somebody for it, because figuring out how not to get canceled is a full-time job and doesn't allow you to be part of culture.
Yeah, very, very interesting. So you're being very real. The ramifications of screwing up are very high. The risks, maybe outweigh the upside. When we say culturally fluent, here's what we mean. What we mean is you gotta understand the insights. Like, you gotta be cultural fluent means understand what sort of the consumer zeitgeist is, what the different segments want, different from what do you do and how you respond. Cultural fluency means understanding the different segments, understanding the different needs, how you market, how you respond. That's a whole other, right? Like that's like a very company to company specific deal, because to your point, it really depends on your own identity and your permission to play and things of that sort. Um, let's go into your past a little bit. You scaled Victoria's Secret's Pink into, again, what's described as a $500 million cultural powerhouse. Worked with numerous brands that are deeply embedded in culture. In today's rapidly shifting landscape, what do you think are the essential ingredients for brands to move beyond simple awareness to actually achieving this next level? And really becoming woven into the fabric of lifestyle and conversations.
At its core, and I would say, if not the most important, right up there, maybe one or two, is humility. Brands have to operate with a sense of humility in today's culture, because the points of view are so energized and the intensity of the discourse is what it is, with very few issues that you probably can count on one hand. Even if you disagree, you have to respect the point of view. Now, there are some racism, anti-Semitism, where it's just an absolute. There is no other side of the argument. Those, I think, brands that want to be part of culture can look at with a sense of safety and security and feel pretty darn good that society has already vetted those. And it is not only okay, but it is expected that you're going to come out on the only side of those conversations that make sense. But there are others where the temperature is hot on both sides, and it becomes a matter of preference, personal values, and judgment. Those are the ones that are the trickiest. And we are seeing that list expand daily. I mean, you want to talk about what's going on in culture? Think about one of the initiatives that was designed specifically as a response to culture, as a response to a missing element in society, and that's DEI. DEI has become a cultural lightning rod. And so if what was designed to help us as a society right a wrong, that alone has now become, I mean, there was always questions, but now it's become a lightning rod issue in business conversations, in people conversations, in economic conversation. So I would say to anybody who's listening to this, it is not a science at all for what it means to be culturally fluent. It is an art form. And the way you practice this art starts with humility. Be open-minded, be willing to listen to both sides of the conversation, even if it doesn't make any sense to you. You got to appreciate it in order to figure out how to navigate it.
You know, it's fascinating that you bring up DI. When the pullbacks happened, maybe what is it? 2 months ago, 3 months ago, whatever it may be, we went right to research to understand what was happening from a consumer perspective and standpoint. And what was interesting is what we saw is the significant number of consumers, especially in the segments, Hispanics, African Americans, how they were. So one, the awareness was very high in terms of who was pulling back. So it's not like it's marginal or it's whoever reads the paper. The level of awareness was high of who was doing it. And then the actions taken by consumers of pulling away from those was also shockingly high. Pulling away from consuming from those companies. And then you had the sort of the Costco phenomena, which was interesting, right? Like you had Target dealing with all this stuff that has had a profound impact in performance. And then you had Costco who tripled down and I think has seen rise in brand momentum. Any perspective on that?
Again, this is a great example of you can understand both sides of the argument. You can appreciate both sides of the argument. It depends on where your values lie as a person. It's very hard for businesses to reflect. Look, if you get 10 people in the room, you're not going to be able to get 10 people to agree whether it's hot or cold outside. You're just not. And that's is a pretty easy data-driven decision. These decisions and choices that companies are making right now, there are very, very many layers to process through. You have to think about, in an absolute way, is there a right or wrong? And I mentioned, two issues in culture that I think there's a clear absolute right and wrong. You've got to work through reflecting the diversity of your own business. I mean, DEI comes with an obligation, which is to reflect the diversity of the people that you represent. I think one of the greatest examples of cultural relevance, fluency, understanding that has been in practice for years, and as a brand, they get lauded for in a positive way, regardless of their religious affiliation, is Chick-fil-A. We don't open on Sundays. If you get religious, it's a day of rest. If you really dig into their values, you can really speak to the Judeo-Christian values that power Chick-fil-A. But the average American looks at it and goes, cool. You know what? Thanksgiving is another one. Businesses went from everybody works Thanksgiving blocks, we're going to give our associates time with their families because they matter. What happens? Monday, huge day. Black Friday, huge day. So the customers have rewarded those brands beautifully for taking a stance. And again, somebody who's watching this or listening to this may say, well, those aren't really cultural issues. They absolutely are. Not every cultural issue has to be a lightning rod issue. Not every cultural issue you're reading, on the front page of the Times or on Yahoo, or you're hearing your favorite newscaster talk about. So it is definitely an opportunity to win, but you got to be willing to put yourself out there, and you got to be willing to sacrifice what happens as a result of it.
And I like what you said earlier. And if there's any backlash, you gotta double down. If you're in it and you've made decisions, I think companies have to be able to double down and not waver.
Oh, the worst is the we agree and then we disagree. Oh, it's terrible.
Yeah. So Doug, your book, which is so relevant, introduces the thinking human approach, aiming to move brands out of the friend zone by blending emotional intelligence with data. It is so relevant. And our last question will be AI related, but it begins to touch on this. Could you share a core insight or perhaps maybe a counterintuitive finding from this approach regarding what truly drives deep customer connection and loyalty today?
Yeah. It's interesting. I set up the premise a little earlier in our conversation. The thinking human is really grounded in the notion that you treat every customer, every patron as if they were the only one that visited you that day. What would you do? How would you treat them? I think the nuance comes in really how you take that and build your post-purchase relationship. So I had the opportunity to live in Japan for a month, and I'm going to butcher the pronunciation, but Omotakashi, I believe I'm pronouncing it right. If I'm not, I apologize, is the customer service philosophy in Japan. Translation is basically that in Japan, they look at the post-purchase relationship as an opportunity to strengthen the tie between their brand and their consumer. Whereas in the US, we look at customer service as triage. They got a problem. I got to get them in and get them out as quickly as they can. I got to go to page 27 of the customer service manual, and that's how I'm going to deal with it. And ironically, it is the easiest way to create brand adversaries with that customer service. Customer service as a term should be put in the trash and taken out. It is an antiquated term. Customer service is really customer experience. And when I pick up the phone and call a 1-800 number, don't make me scream into the phone, representative. Don't tell me that you're sorry for the inconvenience. It's not an inconvenience. Okay. There's an issue that was caused by your business. That's not inconvenience. That's an issue. I'm sorry you're experiencing this. I'm sorry that we've let you down. Start with empathy. Don't start by deflecting it that you're making it about me feeling that I'm being inconvenienced. And then the last thing is realize that, again, it is 5 to 25 times more expensive to get a new customer than it is to keep one. So why is it when you sign up for something and you have to renew, does the rate jump 10x? And you're watching TV and you see the acquisition rates are 10 times lower. And you call and you say, why can't I have the promotional rate? And they'll tell you, well, the promotional rate are for new subscribers. Well, why? I've been with you for a year. You want to raise it 3 or 4%? I gotcha. I understand. But don't rate it 30%. Don't milk me to cover the cost of your acquisition. Thank me for my loyalty. Reward it where it counts.
So you're talking about taking service to a different level.
I'm talking about taking service to a human level.
Yeah, I love that.
Every person that calls into a business or that approaches an employee with a problem has a movie playing in their mind. They could be having a great day. They could be having a terrible day. What role does your employee play in that movie? Are they hero or are they villain? If they're hero, they're not only hero as an individual contributor, but they're hero as a representative of your brand. If they're a villain, more often than not, it's not because of who they are. It's been what they've been instructed to be. Just flip the script. Empower your associates to be ambassadors of your brand, and then provide them guidance and structure to do the right thing. You'd be surprised at the ramifications that come from it and the profit that is derived out of it.
It makes total sense. Last content question, business question, Doug. AI. How could we do this and not talk about the tsunami of AI? What's your sense? What are you seeing in terms of what AI is doing in your world, in your business, and how do you see it evolving?
I love AI. I love technology. I love AI, but AI and technology is not a replacement for human beings. AI is only as good as the inputs you put into it. Just like in the early days of programmatic buying for media, it's only good as to what you feed into the algorithm. AI can help you to see things from a different perspective. They can help you with choices and options. They're not going to do the work for you. And if the expectation is that they should, then you've got really wrong expectations. The content should come from you. That's the what. The how, certainly AI can make you go faster, smoother, or more cost effective. I think it's a necessary opportunity that marketers should avail themselves of. But as opposed to being afraid of it, just figure out how to master it.
Great. So, Doug, this first part we learned from you, and the final portion we're going to learn a little bit about you. On that, what inspires you? What motivates you every day?
If you had asked me this question 10 years ago, maybe even 5 years ago, I'd give you a different answer. What really motivates me is the opportunity to do great work while doing great things for people. And great things could be providing them a product or a service. It could be helping them to be their best self. But that really is what gets me going every day.
It's people. It's back to human. You're very consistent. It's the human aspect.
Yeah. It's people. There's not enough leadership training in graduate school or early in your career. You're so much pressure is put on you as you start your career to achieve. And you realize at a point that you can achieve so much more if you grab a group of people and get them rowing in the same direction. And, leadership for me is a muscle that I train every day. I try to be better today than I was yesterday and want to be better tomorrow than I was today. And that's not because I don't think of myself as a good leader, but I always think of myself as a work in progress. I don't handle every meeting, every phone conversation perfectly because I don't believe there is such thing as perfect. But if I can fall forward and get better, that's all I can really ask of myself.
Super. And Doug, if you could travel back in time and give your 20-year-old self advice, this is for our younger audience that is really in so much need of perspective and wisdom, what would that be?
My 20-year-old self. Wow. First thing is I would take a look at what I was wearing and I'd probably just shake my head and be like, come on, dude. I mean, I 20 years ago, 20-year-old self, it was a shirt, tie, suspenders culture every day. And I think I was influenced a little bit too much by the movie Wall Street and maybe took the whole Gordon Gekko, Bud Fox things a little too seriously. I think what I would tell my 20-year-old self is it's okay not to know. It's okay to say, I don't know. There's a power from not knowing the answer. Being the smartest person in the room doesn't mean being the smartest person in the room. Being the smartest person being in the room is smart enough to know what you don't know and know that it's okay that you don't have to let everybody know that you're the smartest person in the room. I think that's probably the biggest thing that, I've had to work on in my career is really embracing that it's okay not to know.
It's so it's so powerful, and we see folks that want to be the all knowing, and generally, I think there's a limit to the potential of those folks. So I fully agree with all that you're saying, and as you're talking about the dress code, which is funny, it's unbelievable how that has changed. It's unbelievable that I'm wearing
Yeah.
this for this podcast. It would not have happened many years ago. And to finish off this great episode, Doug, what do you do for fun?
You're going to find me on the tennis court. Now, fun is an interesting way to describe my relationship with tennis. I am passionate about it. I love it. I held myself to a crazy high standard. I'm a competitive person by nature, and tennis is kind of where I let it all go. So if you're not finding me in front of this computer or on my phone, or even with the kids, it's on the tennis court.
Any pickleball yet or no?
Pickleball is not a sport, sir. Pickleball is a game. And I say that not to offend any pickleball players, but if you play pickleball, you know that you can get really good really quick. And to me, that is the definition of a game, not a sport. Powerful game. Love where it's going. Respect it. Respect all of the brands that play in it. But tennis players will tell you, pickleball is not a sport.
So I'm a tennis player.
Okay.
So I share the passion. I grew up in Ecuador. Pickleball has been a great social thing with my wife and I. But what's interesting is that it's really a US centric phenomenon. If you like in Europe and in Latin America, it's maybe the emerging sport is padel, right? But pickleball is sort of nowhere to be found, which is fascinating.
It's here to stay. My local tennis facility where I play converted a couple courts into pickle, and I just remember walking in and going, "Oh no!" But I've played a couple. It's a lot of fun. It's a lot of fun, and you can tell why it's kind of sweeping the nation. But it's not a sport. Not a sport. So all good.
It's been a privilege to have the conversation with you.
Thank you.
Thank you for all your wisdom and shared experience. Congrats on a phenomenal trajectory. And again, really appreciate it.
You're a good human being. I appreciate being on this podcast. It's meaningful to be talking about these difficult things. And, I hope that if people walk away from this conversation, they don't walk away with an understanding of what the right way to think about it is, because there is no right way or wrong way. There's just a way. And I hope you find your way and double down on it when you can.
Well, remember the point, it's an art, not a science. This has been another exciting episode of Cultural Fluency Makers. See you next time. Thank you again. That's a wrap on another episode of Cultural Fluency Makers. Thank you for joining us. Please share your comments and what you would like to hear more about. Be as specific as possible. For show notes and more, please visit culturalfluencymakers.com. This show is proudly sponsored by Collage Group, unleashing the power of cultural intelligence to fuel brand growth. Please follow Collage Group on LinkedIn, and we will see you next week.